This power.
Oh, we got moved for
It's dark in
more
there.
time.
Some lights off.
So much fun. She has so much
Really dark. It's a good thing.
The lights aren't on. Now they have an issue with. no superintendent. Sorry, it's crazy. Hi, Dennis. He just done speaking. Hi, Dennis. Dennis. Hello.
I didn't hear you. Hi.
I said hi.
Focus.
You are.
Good evening, everybody. We'll call this meeting of the Delta Township Board to order. With board members and guests, please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Trustee Mohica,
Yes.
trustee Cascarella,
Present.
trustee Brewer,
Present.
trustee Bowen,
Here.
treasurer Fedewa,
Here.
clerk Clark is present, supervisor Fletcher.
Here.
You have quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. First off, we have a presentation. We have the final preliminary design update on the sheriff's substations. We have representatives from Crispin Company and C2AE here to make a presentation. So, Ernie, I'll turn things over to you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fletcher, board members. Nice to be with you tonight. In your packet, you'll have a couple documents, and like I said, the representatives from Capital Consultants or C2AE. I used to be going by Capital Consultants, but C2AE now, and Crispin are here to kind of walk through that, kind of tell you where we're at. And I mean, basically, when we were back before you last in May, we had kind of worked through some conceptual stuff, and you kind of given us buy-in to proceed with schematic design. So we've been working through that in the background. We now have a cost estimate that's been refined based on that schematic design. We've answered a lot of questions and have updated the document. So with that, I'll let Rob Crow with Crispin kind of kicks off, and then feel free to answer any questions as they walk through the documents.
Thank you very much. Again, my name is Rob Crow, project executive with Crispin Company. So thank you for having us here today. We're excited to kind of give you an update on that process. As Ernie mentioned, so continuing the design through what we call schematic design. This is still, somewhat early and preliminary, but allowing us to provide a level of certainty with the cost to give the township the decision to move forward or not on how to procure that. So in your packet, I'll keep it fairly high level, but just kind of walk you through what's in there. And then we're very happy to answer any questions that you may have. So from schematic level design, into this first portion of what you've got in your packet, you'll see a project cost summary with the heading there. Yep, that's the document. So this captures all the construction costs kind of running from top to bottom within the building system for the replacement of the sheriff's substation and the adjacent cold storage building that would fall within the footprint of the new building and new site work that would be relocated north of the current Parks and Rec building. So those are inclusive of this. You walk through the trade costs on this first page. We get into some of the other things listed like general requirements, some of the indirect trade costs, and then subtotal construction costs down at the bottom of page 1. And I'll flip on to the next page where there are some other indirect costs that we want to accommodate or we want to account for. So it's an all-in fully vetted number. So you understand that going forward, this would be able to accomplish all the needs and requirements as discussed and talked through with the township and with coordination of the county sheriff's department. So it brings down to a couple bottom line numbers down here, the bold black towards the middle of page 2 there. But we are still in that realm of the $15 million range that we talked about in a previous update to you all. So that is for procurement. If it is so within the choice of the council to go forward on a timeline where potentially on, funding with a ballot something in November, procurement in the June timeframe of 2023 with potential completion by the end of calendar year 2024. We've got that factored into these anticipated escalation costs and cost increases for material or labor that would be built into that. So below that, we were also asked to say, to make an estimate on what would the price be if it was postponed for any number of reasons to procure that in June of 2024. The cost, as I don't think anyone would be surprised, would go up based on the economic conditions. So just for planning or criteria, we've got that included there for you. A couple other notes just to call your attention to it. We were asked to look into the cost of that radio tower that's owned by the township that was put up and to our understanding isn't quite utilized at the moment. So that is not in the cost above, but if you wanted that to be part of it, there's a dollar value there just to give you a sense for that. And then also a cost that is within the number, within that $15 million approximate value. A backup generator was discussed for the new facility. It is 100% backup as included in the documentation today. So if that is determined to be important to have, what the cost is built into it, there would be other ways that could be discussed as the design progresses if you wanted to do that at a level below 100% of backup power. But not anything we need to decide today, just something we were asked to provide there. There are a couple more pages here. We could stop at the floor plan or the site plan if you'd like, but I don't want to dive into that if it's not something you'd like to get into here or not tonight. But we're happy to field any questions or provide any additional information that you may have.
Folks have questions?
Ernie, is there a tank there? Or we don't know? I was looking at that. I don't remember us talking about a tank.
There used to be an old fuel tank over there. I started looking through the records. I believe it was removed, but we can't find 100% proof. So we're going to do some exploratory digging probably to confirm that, but there was a tank there at one time.
Thank you.
And to that point, it was what kind of fuel was it?
I think they had diesel, gasoline, leaded, I think back then.
So if that's leaked in any way, shape or form, then we have some contamination that we have to deal with in remediation.
Yep.
And
I believe you have dollars in there for allowance to do that, correct?
Yeah, we included an allowance to remove that fuel tank if it does exist in that number. And there's also an allowance in that number in the total cost today to remove contaminated soils if it does exist.
so if it does not exist, then that would be a savings.
Absolutely, yep.
Okay, thank you.
Just real quick as a follow-up to that, where is that in the estimate? I don't know if it's embedded in one of those line items, but and what is that amount for both the tank removal and potential soil remediation?
So it would be inside, looking at the first page of the summary there, inside the site work category of between site preparation and the site preparation and part of site improvements, G10 and G20. And off the top of my head, I believe that the soil contamination removal allowance is $100,000. And then the allowance that we have allocated for fuel tank removal is about $200,000.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ernie, what would be the advantages or disadvantages of removing the radio tower?
So my understanding from talking to Gary Bosick is that there was a special land use permit granted for the erection of that tower originally. I think it requires that the tower come down within 6 months of it no longer being utilized as a radio tower. A lot of the antennas and devices that were on that have been solely removed over in time. I think the last remaining ones were some were replaced when the county switched systems for their EMS radios. So I think we're down to a potential use with utilities that we're still kind of investigating. So if there's any remaining possible use for our own systems, we probably want to leave it up. If we think we're done with it, then the special land use required to come down, and there'd be maybe a benefit to taking it down as part of the project. But it will kind of want to wait and see how that plays out, make sure there is no more further use for any of our own systems. So some of our stuff on the utility side is still a little bit on design with the next phase of the wastewater plant. So we'll know those answers a little better as we move forward with that process.
Okay, thank you.
Beth.
Could it be leased for cell usage? The tower? If we didn't want it, we could lease it to someone and they could set up cell.
Potentially, I don't know if there's limitations with the special land use.
You'd have to evaluate it to see if it was structurally sound enough to support whatever the modern or whatever service.
Okay,
Possible.
but it's a possibility. Okay, thank you.
Questions?
If I may, so just the plant a seed, I guess, to move forward. So from a technical standpoint of project delivery, we're kind of at a stopping point right now. You all have had some discussions, and we'll continue discussions about, coming up with the dollars to fund this, and should the project move forward. So at this point in time, this team is kind of in a pause mode. The way their contract is written, we can get them moving towards continuing on. So you'd have a couple of options that you might want to consider. One would be we just let them sit and wait until November. If you put a ballot question out there, if it passes, then we can re-engage with them and finalize our design, realizing our design right now is 30-40% complete. The other option, if you felt like you wanted to keep things going, we could save some time by continuing to progress with the design and then obviously stop short of bidding anything until we knew for sure that the project was going to go. So that's just an option you've got. Just the teams told me that they can get us from 30 to 100% design and out to bid and get, so we'd be building next year if that's the way it goes. But some more time to finish design would always be helpful too. And, having the design on the books, should something pop up that prevents us from moving forward with the construction, we'd still have the design on the books. So it'd be a little bit of risk, but it wouldn't be thrown away work. So just wanted to mention that in closing. So.
Yeah. You want us to give you direction right now, Brian? Or do you want to wait and put that as part of the overall conversation?
I guess that's, up to the board. We certainly, I know we have a pretty robust discussion coming later. But certainly we'd like to keep things moving forward, but it can always wait till next week too for direction on continuing with the design.
Well, I'm not necessarily thinking we need to wait till next week. I just wanted us to discuss it right now, or if you want to just wait until we had the discussion on financing. Pretty much all I asked, because, quite frankly, I see no reason why we won't just keep things moving forward.
Yeah, I think that.
I don't see any big discussion items. We can get through our agenda as is. I mean, I don't see any big discussion items that's going to slow us down till we get to that. Get that out of the way. Delve right into it.
That's about moving forward.
All right.
I think as Ernie mentioned, it wouldn't be throwing away work. It's just taking advantage of time. We certainly don't want to be presumptuous, but certainly with these projects, there's, everything now, it's helpful to keep things moving. So.
Okay. Well, thanks, guys. We appreciate all the work that's gone into this so far.
Thank you.
We have the agenda before us. Any additions or deletions? Motion to approve.
I move to approve the agenda as presented.
Is there support?
Support.
There is support. All those in favor of approving the agenda as presented, please say aye.
Aye.
All those say nay, motion carries. All those opposed say nay. Now we open up the public hearing on the Buffalo Wild Wings noise waiver. And they're requesting that for the hours of 6 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. on September 10th, 2022. So the public hearing is now open on the request for a noise waiver from Buffalo Wild Wings. Is there anybody in the audience this evening wishing to speak on that? Now's your opportunity. Seeing no one come forward, we will close the public hearing, and that's included in the agenda for the consent agenda. So we'll take action on that as part of that. Now we'll open up public comments for other topics. Anybody here in the audience this evening would like to speak on a public topic? You can come right up to the podium to state your name and your address. And welcome.
I'm Dr. Kristen Lynch, and do you need my full address or?
Yeah, just an address where.
Not
whatever.
socialized to talk to government officials. So
Sure.
10487 North Wheaton Road, Grand Ledge, Michigan.
Great.
All right. So I'm Dr. Kristen Lynch. I'm currently an associate director for a market research firm, and I'm a self-described dog lover and dog park enthusiast. I'm sure you can see where this is going. You may also be wondering how these two worlds collide. Well, let me explain. In leading in my market research experience, I've observed a great deal of desire around a local dog park in the Delta Township community. In fact, in surveying the Grand Ledge area in an informal Facebook, I found that 74% of people would be interested and want a dog park, and that 25% of people would be willing to pay for this amenity. In speaking with you today, I'm in the early stages of planning a privately owned dog park in the Delta Township community, and so that I myself can reap the benefits as well as the community of a local dog park. I believe this will fill a need for a dog park in the community, increase the socialization of dogs in the area, and provide a space for people of common interest to socialize and communicate. As I mentioned before, I'm in the early stages of this process, and I'm looking for the ideal location for this, one that will have both minimal impact on the residents around it, but that will also have a maximum impact on myself and the community. I believe this property was just sold to Delta Township Parks and Rec on Nixon Road. It's 3 parcels, and it's near the Mount Hope, the newly developed Mount Hope Park. And I'm actually asking you if there are any options, or if I may get on a potential agenda for purchasing or land contracting this piece of these 3 parcels for a dog park in the area.
Well, I would recommend that you sit down with the planning department and with the manager's office.
Yes.
And discuss all these topics. And if something comes together that they deem should come back before the board, they'll bring it back to us.
Okay, awesome. So I have spoken with the parks director, and he recommended that I just introduce myself and let you guys know I'm planning it and what potentially next steps were, because this particular parcel was actually purchased through Eaton County before it went to auction. So there might be some legality that would need to be approved through the board if I did end up purchasing, or might be some blockers potentially for purchasing that land. So
yeah, just meet with staff, and if a proposal comes together, then I'll come back to the board.
awesome. Thank you so much.
Yep, thanks. Anybody else in the audience would like to speak this evening?
Good evening, Supervisor Fletcher
Good evening.
and trustees of Delta Township. I'm Barbara Michelle Tate. I am a former middle school assistant principal at Waverly Middle School, the former assistant principal at Waverly East, and a former Waverly teacher, now retired. I live at 3820 Starlight Lane, Lansing, Michigan. I live on the Ingham County side of Starlight Lane. However, the yellow line down the middle of Waverly Road divides Ingham County and Eaton County. My complaint, and it is a complaint, that I have lived in my house since 1978. When we purchased our home, it was a delightful delightful area to live in. At that time, Clark Gas Station was located across the street in Eden County in the 3200 block. Since that time, there is a development of businesses that now have occupied that parcel of land. I'm here because it disrupts my peace. It can be as late as after 2 o'clock in the morning. And the noise and the traffic and the car tires squealing and the car headlights flashing into my house that time of night. I live in a 2-story dwelling, and at night I like to open my windows. And quite often, as an old teacher, I go to bed. And quite often I'm disturbed at night with the noise, the headlights, the traffic, and the cars coming in and out of those businesses across the street. I've talked with our 3rd district commissioner and Lansing council member, Adam Hussein, and other members who live on my street. We are a 1-street area. And we've talked to other members who live on my street, and it is quite disturbing. It is no longer peaceful. It is no longer quiet. It is no longer a place where you can enjoy your home. And I just wanted to bring it to your attention that it is concerning living in my house and trying to enjoy my house. So again, I thank you for listening to me. I thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to you. And I sure hope there's something you can do about it. Thank you. Good night.
Well, thank you for coming and thank you for bringing it to our attention. As you can see, we have law enforcement in the back of the room. So they will, I'm sure, look into any enforceable actions that could be done down in that area if there's any laws that's being violated or anything down in that area.
Well, the law of, I did go to law school, and noise is a law, against the law, to disrupt people's peace. And that does happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Yep.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the audience? Seeing no one coming forward, we'll move on with the agenda then. Next up is the consent agenda. What's the pleasure of the board on the items on our consent agenda this evening? Karen.
To approve the consent agenda as presented this evening.
Is there support?
Support.
There is support. Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll on approving the consent agenda this evening?
Trustee Mohica,
Yes.
trustee Cascarella,
Yes.
trustee Brewer,
Yes.
trustee Bowen,
Yes.
treasurer Fedewa,
Yes.
clerk Clark is yes, supervisor Fletcher.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Now we move down to the items of business. First one up is the case number LS 22-5, the lot split, lot 21 Gettysburg Estate subdivision. This is the one to help get the land there to do our sewer upgrades. What's the pleasure of the board on this one? Andrea.
I move that the Delta Township Board approve the lot split described in case number LS-22-5 involving lot 21 in the Gettysburg Estate subdivision, subject to the following stipulation. The lot split shall not become effective until the new legal descriptions resulting from the lot split are recorded with the Eaton County Register of Deeds office to ensure that the result lot divisions are properly included in the township's property assessment records.
Support.
Has been moved and supported. Is there discussion?
Yes, Brian, when do you anticipate the second part of this transaction to come before the board?
Soon. This is the first step that's needed to enter into a purchase agreement, which we've already negotiated and
And that would
with
come, when do you anticipate that'll come before the board?
as soon as this is, I guess, taken care of.
Okay, all right. So soon. Very good, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Item number 9, final consideration of Paulide rezoning request in case number 6-22-5. This would change a zoning from office to multifamily residential. I know Paul is sitting in the office, in the audience this evening. What's the pleasure of the board on this one?
I move that the Delta Township Board approve the IDE request to rezone the property described in case number 6-22-5 from O office to RM multiple family residential of case number 6-22-5 for the following 3 reasons that are outlined in this document.
Is there support? There is support. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Item number 10, the 2022 Ultium 3 battery plant water and sanitary sewer service agreement. What's the pleasure of the board on that item?
Where is it?
Supervisor Fletcher.
Clerk.
I move that the Delta Township Board accept the proposed contract amendments number 1 and number 2 from OHM for the purpose of providing additional design and bidding phase engineering services related to the Ultium 3 battery facility sanitary sewer system upgrades projects in the amount of $536,000. Further, that the township manager is hereby authorized to sign and execute an agreement for said services on behalf of Delta Township. I further move that the Delta Township Board accept the proposed contract amendments number 1 and number 2 from Tetra Tech for the purpose of providing additional design and bidding phase engineering services for the Ultium 3 battery facility water system upgrades project in the amount of $343,480. Further, that the township manager is hereby authorized to sign and execute an agreement for said services on behalf of Delta Township.
Support.
It's been moved and supported. Is there discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed say nay. Motion carries. Next up is item 11, the November 8th, 2022 election draft ballot proposal. As we discussed at the last couple of board meetings, we have a couple of options before us. One is to do a 2 mil public safety millage to fund both the building and to make sure that we keep deputies on the road. The other option would be to split those into 2 proposals, one for the building, one for going towards supporting public safety, and then third would be to just put a 1 mil on the ballot to fund the building at this time. So those are the options we have to choose from this evening. So with that, we'll open it up to the floor for discussion on that. Mary?
Well, I support that we do a combined 2 mil package. That I think it's extremely difficult to separate the 2 issues. We are in desperate need of a healthier, larger facility for our deputies and detectives to work in. And I think it's confusing to the public to make them as 2 separate issues when they're really one wrapped together.
Other discussion? Yeah.
I will just kind of reiterate, because I know we have other members of the public here, my comments from our previous discussion, fully support and understand. And I know we've spent a lot of time, even prior to my role on the board, considering a new substation for our sheriff deputies. And I know that is a significant need and fully support that. As I've conveyed before, my concern is with the request for operations as well as for that facility, how that may impact some of the residents in our community that are on fixed incomes and will struggle given the circumstances we're all experiencing with inflation, high gas prices, food, medicines, all of that, and elevated property taxes as well, just given the markets. So just concerns about those impacts on those that are lower income in our community and on fixed incomes that may really struggle with this, and not in any way a lack of support for our law enforcement and the credible work that they do in protecting our community. Just want to convey my concern with that full proposal and the impacts that we'll have on those members of our community.
So what's your position?
I have, and I've conveyed before, I support what we've been focused on for especially the last year and a half, fully support efforts on the new sheriff's substation, but I am concerned about a proposal that would be more significant than that.
Other folks, comments? Beth?
I'd like to refer to the information provided by Courtney in her email. Is she here this evening? She's not. She is. Oh, sorry, I didn't see you, new readers. So please correct me if I'm wrong. So at this point right now, for ambulance, fire, and police, 14% of the budget for those three services are covered by millage. Correct. And 85% is covered, or 15%, 85% is covered by general. Whereas with the operating millage, that would up what's covered by millage to just under 30%. So it would double what is already in millage.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Because basically we levy 1 mil of ambulance, slightly head lead down, and we'd be doubling that to 2.
Okay. And would this affect our multiplier? Last time we talked about that formula for our base. Would any of this impact that? Would it reduce our base
Yeah,
operating?
so for headly override,
Yes.
so that's only on the taxable value side.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay,
that
so we won't see any
having more yeah.
impact.
The headly override could impact the millage fractionally by reducing it, but having the millage wouldn't make it go quicker or something.
Okay, okay. So my position is that, my position still is that I believe that we should put the millage on as 2 separate questions, one for the substation, one for the operating costs. Because that way, if people want to split the difference and only pay for one at this time, hopefully we'd be able to get the substation. And, hopefully we'd get both. But if we don't get both, if we put it as one thing and people don't want to pay the whole 2, then the whole thing could go down and then we're stuck. But I just wanted it to be clear in the public record that this millage would not 100% cover all of our police operating costs or anything. It would up the percentage that is covered by millage, reduce what we're getting out of the general fund, but by that much.
Yeah, no,
So,
it definitely would not cover. That would be a
Okay.
lot of mills.
yeah. So my position is put it on the ballot as 2 separate questions.
Thanks, Beth.
Thank you.
I support the 2 mills moving forward. I think we should move forward at this point. Oh, I believe we should move forward at this point, and I support the 2 mills for public safety millage.
Well, I assume you have a rationale for that, trustee. I think everybody else is expressing their rationale for their position. I think we owe it to the board members. I think we owe it to the public what our rationale is. And in that, let me tell you why mine is. So as I said before, I've been very conflicted. One of our strategic goals was to enhance our revenue. We've been trying to have a very attractive community with sort of one hand tied behind our back. Some of that is of our own doing, and some of it is because we are a cash cow for Elk County. I believe the road millage falls in that category. I believe that the recently approved ballot proposal for a county millage, a $0.5 mil for a county park system, falls in that category. And I find it curious that the County Board of Commissioners, who are facing a structural deficit of their own for their sheriff and their public safety. Supposedly discussed a millage for that and yet didn't approve it. What they did approve was a parks millage. And I guess that's more popular than a public safety millage in their eyes. I have a problem as to why they did it that way, what their priority is. I have a problem that we don't have any county parks in Delta Township at all.
We don't, but Dennis, could you keep it? You're getting non-germane to the topic at hand, talking about county parks and villages.
So-
Their reasoning for approving it or not really.
Okay, well, I'm getting there, and this is the rationale that I have come to is, and I want to thank Courtney for her additional information and comparing the millage supported part of the operations of Meridian versus Delta versus the general fund. And I look at these numbers on a percentage basis, and I see that if we were to do the 1 mil for the debt service and the mil for the operating, we'd basically be covering our operating costs at that point of about 30%. Meridian has about 38% covered by their millages. So we would still be covering 9% more utilizing our general fund for our public safety than what Meridian Township is. And that's pretty much apples to apples as you can get. So I think it's defensible to ask for an operating millage. I think it's certainly defensible to ask for a debt service millage for the building. But I don't believe it's defensible to say it's too confusing for our residents to figure it out that there's a difference between the two. And I think commingling them actually makes it more confusing. And yeah, you can say 1 mil for this and 1 mil for that, but people can get easily confused on the ballot. So given that and the propensity to try to acquire additional revenue to cover our costs, and this actually earmarks the cost for the specific service of what our residents are receiving. So I can support both, but I would like them independent to give the residents, again, the choice to decide whether they want to support an operating millage versus a debt service millage, or if it's important enough and we make the argument strongly enough that it's needed. And I think these numbers bear it out, but I don't like commingling the issue. And I think that's just caused confusion. And I think it's more confusing to do it that way than not.
Thank you. All good points. And I wanted to come here tonight to hear what my board colleagues were saying to make sure that I was understanding their perspective, because they each connect with, all of you connect with residents in your area, and you hear from people just like I do. So this is really one of those, I do believe that we certainly need the millage, no question about it. I heard Sheriff Wright talk about the challenges that he's having with retaining police officers. And it's a problem that everybody's having, but he's really like grasping at straws now that I don't know what I'm going to do. We're losing them to other places because we can't pay them enough. We had similar situations or similar circumstances with our fire staff. And thank goodness we're finally fully staffed, but it's retaining them because they can go somewhere else in May for, a little bit better offer. So, and things are just getting more and more expensive. So I understand that. And I think that it is necessary to have the millage on the ballot in November. What I struggle with is combining the two or not. Communication is key. So regardless of which we do, if it's 2 or 1, I think we're really good, and our administration are really, really good at communicating with our community. to explain things thoroughly. We could put a video up on our website and go through it. We could do a township. We do all kinds of things, town hall meeting. But I think we're pretty good at that, but the need is there. The one thing that I thought about, because I really understand where Andrea is coming from with trustee Andrea, is I too worry about the people with moderate income who may not have the resources and the means to pay an additional $200 annually for this. Because we have an aging population too, so they may not have those extra dollars. It may be a small amount to most or some, but to others it is not. And that always resonates with me to be mindful of them. One of the things that I thought about, and I talked to Brian at length today about this because this was on my mind. It was troubling for me. Anytime we have to go to the residents to get money, but this is important. Public safety is important. And I've talked to a number of residents over the past couple of weeks over the phone, and they were in support of this. Do what we need to do to keep Delta safe. I didn't talk to anybody who was opposed to it. Nobody. They were on board with it. But one of the thoughts that I had, and I talked to Brian about it, is could we consider 1.5 mil instead of 2? But I know the need is there. So I'm challenged with that as well, because I know we can support it. Dennis just ran through the numbers. It's supportable, it's defensible as it is. But maybe that's a way to get everybody on the same page, is instead of it being $200 on a $100,000 home, it's $150. I don't know. I don't know if that's something people want to consider. But either way, I think that they're both important. Putting them together or not, I just don't have that. I'm sorry, I just don't have that passion. Is it together? Is it not? Is it needed? Absolutely. I think so. But the debate on putting it together or not is just not a debate that I'm in. I think it's needed. And I would trust, and maybe we can turn to administration. Is there any challenges they see with communicating it clearly out to our residents if it was put in as one? I don't know, but those are my thoughts.
Well, thanks, Vonda.
Thank you.
I think everybody's had a chance to say their first round.
Mhm.
My opinion that I voiced a couple meetings ago hasn't changed in terms of, I think there is the need for the 2 millage. I think quite frankly, the conditions have actually even changed more towards going forward with this as a result of what's going on at the county. Because the county is talking in terms of, if you saw the news last weekend, it was all about the need for paying the deputies more in the long term. And the chairman of the board was saying there needs to be a county public safety millage. So they're going to be coming at some point with one. Separate from that, we have a need, if we want to maintain our current force, we're going to need more revenue at some point. We're definitely long-term will need revenue as those costs rise if we wish to keep those positions. And remember, we had other positions such as a school resource type officer, that position is no longer there. And it'd be nice to at some point possibly return to having a position like that. You're just not going to do that without revenue. That's going to make that possible. So I think it's important that we do this. I also think it's important that we have a building that is state of the art, that is conducive to the work that's being done by our deputies and provides them with a decent and reasonable facility. I think the current facility is gone well past its lifespan. I don't think that it meets the needs of our deputies or the needs of our community, and I think it's time to replace it. The thing that I would never want to see happen is by the time this building gets constructed and online, we're actually reducing the number of deputies on the road. So that at the time we're having this beautiful ribbon cutting of a nice building, we're saying, oh, but there'll be one fewer deputy on the roads because we had to make budget cuts to deal with that. And I think the public would say, see, you build a nice building and you can't afford to keep the deputies on the road, and keeping the deputies on the road is most important. Now, granted, debt service to build a building would not be something that would have been used for to keep them, but the public's not going to see that. they're not gonna necessarily get that in mind. So I think that we need to, if we're gonna build this building, which we need to make sure that we also will not be in the position anytime soon to where we'll be having to reduce the number of positions that we have. And by passing a millage now, that will be a broad public safety millage that can go towards keeping them on the road and building the building too. We'll take care of that. So by the time this building's constructed, by the time we're opening it, we're not gonna be also announcing a reduction in force, which I don't think we want to get there and stuff. So that's why I think it's important to go with both together. I'm just thinking, with the public, with the county talking about the need to keep deputies on the road right now, with the city of Lansing talking about their 3.9 mils for public safety. I think if you present two, they're gonna say, our priority is to keep deputies on the road. We will vote for the one to keep deputies on the road. And then we won't end up with a building. So that is definitely something that I am concerned about. I think that we do have options going forward if we presented it together. If the public did not support that, then you can always then after that, take it back to them and separate and say, okay, you didn't want it together. What would you like? Or just take back building the building and seeing what happens with the rest of it. That'd be a decision we could make afterwards. But this isn't the only bite at the apple. However, I think if we went with just something for the building, and the county got out ahead of us and then put a public safety, I think it'd be very difficult for us then to follow up and do our own public safety millage because the public could say, hold it, didn't we just take care of that problem? We just passed a millage for the county sheriff. You contract with the county sheriff. Why do you need another millage? And they don't realize what the sheriff is talking about is a millage to keep road patrol in the out county. As Dennis said, they're going to take our money and put deputies in the out county. That's what this county millage is going to do, which means our residents could pay for a new millage and have us still reducing the number of deputies on the road because our general fund is no longer there to maintain it. So I think we want to get revenue towards public safety, make sure that doesn't happen, to do it now before the issue gets even more muddy, more confused. That's why I support going forward now. And 2 mills to fund both. If the public votes it down, the public votes it down, and then we come back, we split it up. We can come back next year with something different and give them the opportunity. But I think by starting out with what I think is probably in the best interest long-term to make sure we can provide them with what they've said they wanted. They want deputies on the road. They want that protected. And even though the public has never stepped foot inside our substation, we want to make sure we have a decent and adequate facility so that our deputies can provide the public safety that our residents want. So I think we need both. So I think we jeopardize that if we don't do it together now and stuff. And Mary actually had her hand up first, and Andrea.
In response to trustee Brewer's comment about doing 1.5 mils, I had that question after our last meeting, and it's possible we would go, instead of 10 years, we'd go 20 years. But there's a significant cost for interest expenses that I think, Courtney, can you address that? About
Yes,
what
well,
it
if we did,
is?
so I think in your example, right, we would do 1.5 mils. So if we wanted to spread, you could spread the cost of the building over 20 years. That's perfectly reasonable because it's it's an asset that we're gonna have for a long time. You would have more interest cost if you spread it over 20 years. That's kind of why we're shooting for 10. So you could use 0.5 mil for 20 years and then have 1 mil still for operations by extending it.
Do you have a sense, like, can you guess? Are we talking 5 million more for
I think it was
doing it over
5,
20
right?
years, or 10 million?
5 million additional interest if you did it over 20 years.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it adds up. And that was at a pretty,
As an estimate.
Yeah.
Right.
From our
Yeah,
bond
I'm
council,
not
yeah.
asking for you to
yeah.
sign a
Yeah, we
line on
asked,
that, just.
right, yeah, thank you. It's
Yeah.
on videotape now,
Yeah.
only for here, but the, yeah, so it does depend on the interest rate, but yeah, that is another option. I mean, if you did 1.5 mils for 10 years and kept the building at 10 years, then it would be, 0.5 for operating, which is about 800,000 instead of 1.6-ish.
Which really doesn't meet our needs. Our problem is we've already cut 2 positions and we know that 2 more or more will be coming because we have revenue issues. We've known we had revenue issues. That's why we did the franchise fee. And we've not resolved that absence of money. So I think everybody, regardless of their income, expects and appreciates the level of protective service that we have in our community, whether it's police and fire. For them, public safety means a lot. It means a lot to whether or not people want to come into our community. And I'm still back at 2 mills. I mean, if the majority of the board wants to go with 1.5 mills as a combined, I would support it, but.
Yeah, just in one of the original memos, for the 2021-22 and then 22-23 sheriff contract increases was 800,000. Just those 2 years of increases. I mean, that gives you an idea of how quickly it goes.
I just wanted to say, Supervisor Fletcher, I appreciate your comments and especially the updates about kind of the expressed intentions of the county commission in seeking a public safety millage. And then I think all of that plays into this discussion. I do think it's important that when we're having this conversation, because I feel there may be a little bit of mixing of apples and oranges. When we started this conversation just more recently about including a millage for operations, we had the data, I know it's in the packet, it was, that initial information was focused around law enforcement and those additional costs. And we had the graph and we knew where those costs were. And it was focused there. And a lot of the conversation this evening has been around law enforcement. There were comments made and comparing Delta Township and what our broader public safety costs would be compared to some other townships in those broader public safety costs and what percent. So, and I'm not questioning the numbers at all. Treasurer Fedewa, but it was referenced right now, we're at 15, that would be going to 30, but that's throwing in our fire costs, which have really not been part of this discussion. And so we can't talk about law enforcement and the need there. And what we're asking for is addressing costs far beyond that, because what's proposed, that additional millage for operation, covers that different, based on the numbers we had. And I think it's just, we owe it to the public to be really clear about that. And I don't think anyone's intentionally not being, but we're mixing a little bit of those apples and oranges when we're talking about all of public safety costs. And when we're talking about those law enforcement costs, and it's important to our residents. I do believe that it's important to me. I just think we need to be really clear because there's a lot of different numbers thrown out. But what the conversation we've had has really been more of that focus on our office, the deputies on the street that in the community that are providing that protection. So again, I do appreciate the comments that have been made. I just want to make sure we're being really clear, but what's proposed is much broader than that, than just law enforcement.
Supervisor Fletcher, you said if it doesn't pass this year, we could try it again next year and split it up if we go to this time. I just want to point out that this is an election year, so we'll just be adding it to the ballot. If we did it next year, we would have to pay, yes, to put it on a special ballot. So that would be extra cost, plus it pushes us back a year. And I still think that if we put all our apples in one basket and people say no, then we get nothing. But if we can say, here are 2 choices, all yes, some no, that it gives us some wiggle room. And if everything goes down, then my question to Brian or to whomever is, what if we don't get this year? What, do we put the substation on hold until we get the bond? And then what do we do for the operating costs? It just continues to come out of the general fund?
Well, clearly, if we don't pass a way to pay for it, it's gonna be put on hold. You know, it'll be put on hold for either if we decided to go back to the public next year. If we decided we didn't want to incur that cost, we could wait till 2024 and put it on it. But if we don't have a way to pay for it, then yes, the building does not get built. So, yeah, and that could be the end result of anything. If we split it up and then vote against the one for the building, then the building will not go forward.
That was actually a separate question. I was just concerned, what is our contingency? We have no contingency. If it goes down, that's it. The building's on hold until we get the money.
Well, the contingency, it's making do as we may do.
Yes.
We may
Yes.
do up till now with the building that we currently have.
Mhm.
And if the voters say no, they don't want to fund a new building, then we're going to have no choice but to make do with it and continue to make do with it. And we can always at any time in the future, try to go back to the voters, so that will be up to the board and stuff. But if they vote it down, then we will not be building a new building, period.
Right.
Okay.
Well, not to dig in the weeds too much, Trustee Cascarella, but if you look at the Meridian, the data that Courtney provided, you can pretty much split out apples to apples. You have a Meridian police millage of 0.6 of a mil, and then a separate fire millage. And then you also have a combined of 1.47 mils. I don't know what that ratio is. And we have 0. So if we had 1, it would probably be on par with what Meridian is doing for their police. I would guess, an educated guess on that. That's in the weeds. I apologize for that. I feel a little bit vindicated for bringing up the Eaton County Parks discussion and my rationale, because again, why did the county commission vote to put that on the ballot? And they had a discussion on the the police, public safety, but they didn't agree to put that on the ballot. I don't know what those discussions were, but I find that somewhat unusual that they would place a value on a parks millage before a public safety, given the arguments that we're just hearing with our sheriff and the need for all the financial pressures that they have in maintaining the status quo or not eroding further. So I'm just kind of befuddled as why the county commission didn't do a public safety millage for this election in November, rather than just putting the parks on. Maybe someone else at the table knows.
But quite frankly, I'm glad they didn't, because it make passing ours much more difficult if they had one on November, and it'd probably make it so ours would go down too. So I'm glad they did not do that.
I don't know if that's necessarily true and if I agree with that, but I support putting in what the voters decide on this, but I don't think we need to be presumptuous in saying, well, you're not intelligent enough to figure out that, one is for a building and one is for an operations. What it does do in my mind is that we have to make a strong case for the operating part of that millage proposal. And that puts the onus on the township of being very specific as to what these numbers are in understandable lay terms. And that is basically unsustainable unless we have, additional dedicated revenue to help support our police. I think that puts the burden on us to explain that, to put that, to put proposal out there separately so they'll understand it. If they want police on the road, if they want sheriffs on the street, then this is why we're asking for this. And I'm looking at it, and the 3% for salaries, and what's eating it up is an 8% annual increase for the healthcare costs, things like that. And I think the public understand that. They understand the healthcare costs going up, and it's kind of overriding the costs of the salaries and wages that are required to have, you know, a manned police force or a woman, you know. But I think we just need to be very clear as to the duality of these things. Now, I guess a counter argument could be, well, we can do that and they could still be on the same proposal. And that is true. I understand that. But I'm going back to, then they have a choice. I think that they can decide what they think is important as a package, or individually. And I think we're just being more transparent with them when we do it that way. But I do support putting millage proposal on the ballot.
Before I call on you, Fonda, I do want to say I take great exception with what you said in terms of, we're saying those who are advocating for both together are saying the voters are not intelligent enough to understand this. Not one person on this dais at any point during this discussion ever said the voters are not intelligent enough. What has been articulated is that if a decision to build a building without revenue is made, we're going to be potentially cutting deputies at the time it comes online. That's a problem. And we said if they choose not to fund the building and go for the other one, then it creates a problem. We're going to be dumping more general fund dollars into an old building, which is beyond its usefulness. So those are both bad options. So we're not saying the voters are stupid or not intelligent. So don't put words in our mouth and use language like that when you're saying that we're saying the public is not intelligent. No one up here said that, Dennis.
What they did say
Fonda, the
was
floor is yours.
they are confused. They're confused.
Fonda, the floor is yours.
We don't need to confuse them.
Thank you. I have lost track of my question. I think you covered it. I think I was trying to think about if we put both of them up separately and the second one didn't pass, the operational didn't pass, but the building did pass. What position, I was going to check with Courtney, what position would that leave us in financially with being able to address the costs that would come once that building is in place and, you know, other kinds of costs?
So as an example, last year's budget for 22, we used all of our operating revenue, so millage, revenue sharing, everything, right, to cover our operating expense, barely. There was no money for any capital expense. Any capital expense we're doing this year is from reserves or ARPA. So that's just going to get worse. So this year, we're doing our budget meetings right now. And just kind of first glance, everybody's requests are in there, not really, you know, going through them really close yet. I think I've got about $500,000 in operating costs I've got to find to reduce, to make them balance, because your operating revenue should cover your operating expense. So that's just going to keep getting worse because the cost of everything is outpacing the cost that we get from the increase in tax dollars. And that was why we provided that one document a few meetings. I think it's in this packet too, right? Where it shows, you know, we might get 500,000 in new revenue from some of the construction we see, but that gets eaten up very quickly. So that's just going to keep getting worse until we decide that we don't want to do things anymore. There's going to be things that we're not able to do at some point, and that point is vastly approaching. And I think you guys knew that because that was the franchise fee was supposed to be, you know, the helpful tool to fix that. But now that that didn't happen, we have to find something else. And it really is the operation that we just need, you know, general funds, a pot. We need more revenue. It's really, unfortunately, that simple. And public safety is a large part of our cost. I mean, you can see from those numbers, you know, that just is true. And, you know, whether it be fire or sheriff, the sheriff is just a little bit less in our control. Because we're given, the only thing we can control there is number of deputies.
Thank you.
Right.
My comment regarding confusing the voter wraps around the idea that, in my opinion, and I do get an opinion, by separating them as a resident that's not in the middle of this discussion, what we think is important can be confusing from separating them. To me, I hope that we think both of them are equally important, and that's my rationale for them being together. So I move that the Delta Township Board adopt the following ballot language, which will be included as Exhibit A of the resolution to place a question on the November 8th, 2022 ballot.
Is there support?
Support.
There is support. Any discussion?
Is that a motion in our packet?
Yes, it is.
It's the first one.
There it is.
Andrea?
I just want to say before we take a vote on the motion, Clerk Clark, appreciate your comments about both being important, and I don't disagree at all. And I know the operations, I know the challenges we have. I am quite confident that I think our residents, because they care deeply about making, the community and supporting public safety, will likely support this. I do feel there are a minority of residents in our community that will struggle significantly with the additional cost given all the other circumstances. And because of that, I believe it's a minority in our community, but I am concerned that we, because of these additional costs, we become a community that isn't affordable for some people. And I think we've been a wonderful home for many people in a broad spectrum of incomes and backgrounds. And that's valued by me. And so I personally am not going to support it in trying to speak on behalf of those. And it's not a lack of support for our law enforcement, but I know that for minority voice otherwise might not be heard. When this goes to the voters will ultimately decide. And I think there will be strong support in our community for this. I just, I've heard from enough people just really struggling right now with the circumstances, and that timing just makes it very difficult for me personally. And so I just wanted to share that, but I don't disagree with you.
Other comments?
Sorry, can we just, I just want to make sure since this is, so on page 104 of the packet, it's kind of broken into two motions, two action items. So you don't necessarily have to do it that way, but that was how I did it. So the action first would be to decide what you're going to put on the ballot. And then the second action would be to actually put it on the ballot by the resolution.
So what you're saying is that the first motion that I came to is not the motion?
Yeah, well, they're on page 104. The one on the.
I'm using the link. So when I go to the link with it, the third page of the packet dealing with this subject matter has recommended actions. And I read you action 1. You're saying that is an incorrect motion.
That's okay. And you had the 2 mills. You said that you wanted the language with the
Exhibit
combined.
A. If I'm reading Exhibit A at the top of the page, correct?
The action 1 was which option.
Right.
And then the action 2 is actually to instruct or resolution to instruct the clerk to put it on the ballot.
Right.
Won't we just make a motion to, why, I don't.
You can do them both
That
together.
was my intent because
You can
I
do them
don't
both
see
together.
that
if you want. I was
language.
just trying to make it very clear because the language was not, so normally what you would do is you would adopt the resolution, putting it on the ballot, but we didn't have a draft resolution because we didn't know which language option you were going to choose. So you could do it all together as one, just say that you want to move the resolution, but just please be very specific as to what ballot language, which is the 2 mil public safety millage. That's where I had the verbally insert
That's
language.
That's
fine. I just want to clarify.
friendly amendment to my own motion.
Right.
I mean, I'm sorry. I
No,
just
that's okay.
read
That's why
what
I
was
just
in the
wanted to make sure.
packet, so.
That it was clear. So it's basically you're going to adopt the resolution with the language for Exhibit A to be the 2 mil proposal.
Yes.
Yes.
Just so when you go to sign it tomorrow, you know.
Other discussion? I would just, I guess just to wrap up, I'd just say that, you know, I agree 100% with everything that you're saying and the concerns you're voicing, Andrea. I wish what's going on right now with the economy is, you know, we came to this bad situation where it's time to act, yet we're, you know, it's not the best time to do it, but, you know, we're just in that. And look at the rising cost of the building, you know, it constantly goes up the longer we wait. It's getting more and more expensive to do. So, you know, if we wanted to wait, which, you know, I agree, going right now to the voters with a tax increase would be the last thing I'd want to do. It's just unfortunately, it's still, all the things are coming together at the same time. So if we want to make sure that they have the services they count on, I think, you know, we have no choice. But I do want to point out, even if this is adopted by the voters, we will still have the lowest taxes in the region. You know, we will still be lower than all of the, I'll call developed townships, you know, not the rural townships, obviously, but the developed townships and the cities in the Lansing area, we will still have the lowest millage. So, you know, that definitely is still a bonus, I think, for Delta Township that we have the lowest millage. And once again, you know, it'll be the voters that decide. And you're right, you know, Andrea, if there's enough voters who are hurting to the point where they just can't afford it right now, then, you know, they'll voice that through their votes at the ballot box. So I think at this point, we'll turn it over to the voters and let them, you know, let them make that ultimate decision. So if there are no other comments, then Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Clerk Clark, yes. Trustee Mohica,
Yes.
trustee Cascarella,
No.
trustee Brewer. No. Trustee Bowen,
No.
Treasurer Fedewa,
No.
Supervisor Fletcher.
Yes.
Motion is defeated.
Motion is defeated.
I offer a motion for the board. I move that the Delta Township Board adopt ballot language, which will be included as Exhibit A in the resolution, to place 2 questions separately for 1 mil for debt service and 1 mil for operating costs for public safety on the November 8th, 2022 ballot.
Support.
There is support. Is there discussion? Amen. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Oh, hang on a quick second. Trustee Bowen,
Yes.
trustee Brewer,
Yes.
trustee Cascarella,
No.
trustee Mohica,
No.
treasurer Fedewa,
Yes.
clerk Clark is, yes. Supervisor Fletcher,
No.
motion carries.
Motion carries. So we'll have 2 proposals on the ballot. moving forward. Manager's report.
Do we need to do the other one about adopting the resolution?
Thank you, Mr. Supervisor and board members. Just a couple things. We had quite a few events out at Mount Hope Park this weekend. We'll get in the park, which had a good turnout. We had our 3-on-3 basketball tournament, which had 48 teams, and Beer Fest, which for our first inaugural Beer Fest had a pretty good turnout. I gave each a souvenir glass from our Parks Department. And then also just wanted to update you as well as part of the Waverly Village. They will begin construction on the pool and the locker rooms and improving those in September. And hopefully will be completed sometime around January or February. We'll probably have a ribbon cutting for those as well once those are completed. So we will not have a pool during those months. It'll be shut down, but hopefully great improvements will increase usage next year. So that's all I have, but happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have questions for me?
Not a question, but a comment. Is there a pickleball ribbon cutting or something? Was that this week?
That is this week. I believe it's Wednesday morning. Do you remember the time? 10 a.m. on that, yeah.
Now, is that open already?
Yes.
Okay,
It
great.
has been, and it's been used heavily every morning.
I'm sure,
by
'cause I
the-
haven't
by the
received any
groups.
pickleball calls.
Yeah, the new surface turned out very nice and people really are enjoying it. So.
Right. Thank you. Public comment, any final public comment this evening? Any board members have anything? Dennis?
I do. I have two things. One is, we talked about the makeup of our township in the discussion of this millage proposal. And I think we are assuming a lot of what our demographics are. I think it would benefit the board to have basically a demographic presentation as a result of our last census. So we have an idea of the makeup of our township residents, who they are, what the backgrounds they are, what their ages are, do they have school-age children in their households, et cetera, et cetera. We make assumptions, but I don't think we can do that in good conscience without really having an update from the last census, because it's been a long time since this board is, unless we've done it individually, and I haven't, it would benefit us. I would like to have staff have someone give us a presentation on what the makeup of Delta Township as a result of the 2020 census is for our residents, so we have a better understanding. That's one item. The other thing is there was a lead article in the Lansing State Journal yesterday in the Sunday paper, and it had to do with invasive species, and it's centered on Delta Township. It's a lady who was taken upon herself to identify the diminution of native plants and the propagation of invasive species in our parks. And specifically, it was she was referring to Grand Woods Park. And I know we haven't received yet our strategic plan, a comprehensive plan due to the COVID and all those types of things. But when we do, as I've said before, I think an important element of that I believe is very, very conspicuously absent is a mission of environmental stewardship. And I think that article just drove it home, that we have a duty, we are complicit as a township, as a governmental unit, of allowing invasive species through our park system to propagate. And I think we should be more responsible than that. So I just wanted to point that out to the board. If you haven't read it, I'd encourage you to go back to the Sunday State Journal and read the lead article on that. I think it gives us a reason to maybe address that when we have our strategic comprehensive plan next time around. And that's brought before the board.
Thank you, Supervisor. Three things. One, I just wanted to say thank you to the board for supporting my absence. I had been pretty ill, and it feels good to feel good. So I'm really glad to be back here and not watching you via Zoom going, I want to say something, but I can't. So I wanted to share that. And I secondly wanted to thank Mrs. Tate for coming out and making comments about her community. And I look forward to some discussions further to see what we can do or to sort of help in that arena. So thank you, Mrs. Tate. She was a fantastic asset to the Waverly School District. And then the third thing was really for Courtney, I think, and I'm sorry, I'm kind of going backwards a little bit. I remember, maybe I watched it on Zoom, something about a poverty level or something that could be adjusted. I know it doesn't make a big difference, but that's something that we could do as we prepare for the ballot initiative.
Right, so every year the board votes on the poverty exemption standard, so that exempts someone from paying property taxes due to a low income and low asset situation. So in this area, doing research with Ted, most people just use the federal poverty limit.
Mhm.
We do have the option of using higher than the federal poverty limit, which is very common in Washtenaw County, which has very high property values and crazy millages. So I think it was just more common there, just not something down here, but that would be an option, is to say, because the federal, I mean, if anyone's seen the federal poverty limit, it's pretty unfathomable to think that somebody could really live on that. So you could say, maybe 150% of the federal poverty level, that might make some more people eligible to deal with some, both long-term and short-term situations.
Well, I'm wondering, Supervisor Fletcher, is it possible to have a presentation on some options to consider?
Sure.
Yeah, but you'll see that normally in December, the first meeting in December.
Great, thank you. That was it.
I would like to congratulate Clerk Clark and her staff and all of the people who worked on another successful election, primary elections. I worked in one of the precincts. Everything was incredibly smooth, secure. We had a lot of compliments from the voters, a lot of thanks for, thank you for doing this. Thank you for being here. And so congratulations on another successful election. We appreciate all that you do, you and your staff.
Thank you.
And to that point, Mary, was there an adequate amount of volunteers this year?
I had extra.
Okay.
I was gonna say.
Nothing else? Okay, nothing else, we are adjourned.
Something